We're back with our 2024 lead, fresh off a week where some Republicans and former Trump officials expressed outward support for Vice President Kamala Harris, a new and at times scathing insight into former President Trump's foreign policy approach by his former national security advisor, H.R. McMaster. In his new book, At War with Ourselves, he writes Trump, quote, administered long overdue correctives to a number of unwise policies. But McMaster also noted Trump suggested outlandish ideas like bombing drug cartels in Mexico or taking out the entire North Korean army. McMaster also said this today.
In writing the story, I'm hoping to, if he's reelected, to inoculate him a little bit, so that he's not that easy to, to manipulate, and to appeal to, maybe some of his insecurities and some of his predilections.
Mark Esper, former Secretary of Defense under President Trump, joins us now. Very similar through line, I think, in your book, Mr. Secretary. But before I get to that, I do want to ask your reaction to what we just heard from Admiral John Kirby of the White House about his assessment of the administration's Afghanistan withdrawal.
Sure. Well, look, John does a good job, and he's trying to put the best spin on it, but it was an abysmal withdrawal. Cost the lives of 13 brave service members, and it affected our international standing in many ways. It'll be remembered throughout American history, much like the American withdrawal from Saigon in 1975, if you remember American helicopters leaving the top of the embassy, or the failed Iran rescue mission in 1980. It was just a terrible, abysmal, and it certainly marked a major turning point for the Biden administration in its first 6, 7, 8 months. And so there's no explaining it away. And it was hammered home even further when General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and General Frank McKenzie, the Central Command commander at the time, testified before Congress a few months ago, explaining their recommendations that we not withdraw from Afghanistan, or at least the way they did it at the time. So it's a sad chapter.
Yeah, a powerful congressional hearing where those two former generals spoke. I do want to ask, turning back to that book from H.R. McMaster, you said Trump's advisors would kind of flatter the president, saying stuff like, your instincts are always right. The question that I have, both in reading your book and reading McMaster's book, do you look out kind of into the future and see people around the former president who in a second term would be able to tell him the truth, not engage into what McMaster called competitive sycophancy?
Yeah, I like that term that HR wrote. I think it's a very good term. Look, there are people out there who are certainly competent. The thing is, Trump has learned from his first time in office. He's going to only choose people who are loyalists and who will tell him what he wants to hear. And this is why, in many ways, HR's experience in year one of the administration is very different from my experience in years 3 and 4. Trump learned over time and brought in additional people. I talk about bringing in a new band of true believers in February 2020, who really kind of took him in a different direction. That's at a time when there were, in the departments, they were looking to determine who was leaking and who was a true Trumpist, so forth and so on. So I think in the second administration, it's going to look far more like the last year of the first administration. And he's going to really focus on bringing people in who are loyal to him, who share his views and are not going to push back like myself and Jim Mattis and others had done during the first term.
One of the questions I've had over the course of the last couple of weeks is you've been very upfront that you would not support the former president in this election. Do you think we will hear from more of your former colleagues as we get closer to November?
No, I don't think so. I think at this point in time, there's been 2 or 3 of us that have spoken out, myself, John Bolton, John Kelly, that we won't support the president. But I think it's baked in at this point in time. While many have not come out and have sat on the fence and not said anything, I think half of the original cabinet have not come out and spoken in support of Trump. So that speaks volumes as well. So I think we'll see what we see going into the final 70 days now at this point.
The world's challenges clearly have evolved significantly just since the end of the former president's first term in office. When you kind of look out into the future, who do you think would make the country safer and stronger on the world stage, the former president or Vice President Kamala Harris?
Well, I've said on many occasions, I don't think President Trump is fit for the office. To me, I set a bar that says character counts. To me, that's what I look for first and foremost. And then secondly, I look for somebody who can unify the country, who can heal the wounds. People often ask me, what are the greatest threats facing our country today, and they expect I will say Iran or Russia or China, but it's not. It's political extremism coming from both sides of the political aisle, that's really breaking down our politics and making us unable to take tough decisions, whether it's addressing the budget debt or solving the border crisis or standing up to China in a much more effective way. So I think we have to fix ourselves at home first. And so I don't see Donald Trump as able to do that. Now, look, H.R. McMaster also writes, correctly so, that Donald Trump had a number of failures, but he also had a number of successes as well. I thought the major shift on our national defense strategy toward China was very important. And it's bookended at the end of his term with the Abraham Accords. So, but again, to me, integrity matters, character matters, and that's what I look for first and foremost in our leaders.
Just real quick, because we're out of time, but you said a couple months ago you weren't quite there yet on President Biden and supporting him, since you won't support the former president. Are you there on Kamala Harris?
You know, I said that the first party to pick a next generation leader will have a clear advantage, and I think she's shown that over the last several weeks. I've liked her messages with regard to unifying the country. I like the positive, the joy of her campaign, which stands in stark contrast to the Trump administration. But what I'm looking for now, and I think a lot of Americans are, or at least disaffected Republicans, Reagan Republicans like myself, is I want to see her come to the center more, kind of reach out to that large mass of us in the middle who are looking for more common sense, practical policies, not driven by the wings of the party. So that's what I'm waiting for. I got 70 days, and we'll see how it goes from here till then.
Secretary Mark Esper, always appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.